Are you sitting there right now using a PC with an overpriced operating system while you eat unhealthy ramen? Well, I apparently have all of the solutions to your life. Go to Vite Ramen right now and get their healthy protein-filled ramen for 10% off with offer code BrokenSilicon. And then go to cdkeyoffer.com to get 25% off all Windows keys and use Die Shrink to get 3% off everything else on the website. And we'll talk about these sponsors more later. But for now, let's just get on with the show. And welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom, and today I am joined by In the House,
Dan.
That's right. If you'll notice, Dan is the background that he had 4, 5, 7, 6 months ago?
Something like that, yeah.
7. It's already been half a year since you were here. It's ridiculous how fast time is flying lately, I gotta say. But yeah, I mean, Dan... We flew in. We saw Lewis Black at the Nashville Comedy Festival. He did not disappoint. I'd say I've seen him 3 times. This will be the 3rd time. I think that's the best I've seen him too. And his opener was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I've never actually seen him live, but before this, we saw him last night, and you sent me tickets a while back saying, well, Lewis Black is on his retirement tour, basically. So I was like, oh, yeah, I mean, I've been a fan of Lewis Black since I was like...
So we were kids.
8.
Yeah.
Probably, because I've been watching The Daily Show for so long. So, I kind of had to go see him because this is the only chance I would get to see him, I guess.
Yeah. And so forgive us if the mic doesn't sound as good as usual. Dan's using his Phoenix laptop, of course, with some of the backup mics that I have lying around, which it should end up sounding fine, but it will not sound the same as it usually does. I don't really think it will sound much worse, though.
I don't even know if it will sound worse. It just sounds different, I suppose.
Techno writes in, and he says, when you listen to podcasts, you prefer to listen to them while working on something else, during going to sleep, or just putting your full focus on the podcast? Well, I'll chime in and say it does depend on the podcast, but what's your general answer, Dan?
I mean, usually while I'm working, exercising, walking the dogs, that type of stuff is when I usually listen to podcasts.
Yeah, I tend to listen to it while I'm driving. Especially if I'm driving by myself, because for my girlfriend, I think Comedy Bang Bang, she doesn't dislike it, but I don't know if she's ever really in the mood for how insane and random Comedy Bang Bang is. Whereas me and you, Dan, I mean, we're pretty much always up for listening to Comedy Bang Bang, if we're being honest.
Yeah, and then I think they're in a pretty consistent era with that podcast, but there are times where the quality varies pretty vastly from episode to episode. So
if you don't like their shtick, I mean, I don't know if you'll like it every episode.
Put on a below average episode, it's like, oh, this was just not funny for an hour and a half.
But to answer that is a podcast I tend to listen to while driving or doing like around the house tasks, not working hard. When I'm working, I tend to listen to war news podcasts, because if I listen to something funny, especially if it's a good episode, I'm not going to get nearly as much work done. But if I'm mowing the lawn, it doesn't slow me down really at all. And even if it did, who really cares if it slowed me down? I'm mowing the lawn. It's not like, something that has a deadline for making money or something. But I guess to answer his question, we listen to it while working or driving or doing a task. I don't hard listen to podcasts ever, unless it's like, like your mom's house or like Neil Brennan's podcast, where it's really a show you're watching.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to watch it while eating dinner or something. All right, let us get to the corrections here. Dark Helmet writes in and he says, PC Game Pass is $10 a month, not $20 a month. That's $20 a month for Ultimate that you guys seem to quote every now and then. Of course, this only makes the economics for game publishers even worse when you consider that, when you consider that Xbox sales are going down, and so more and more people are probably going to switch to the cheaper Game Pass soon. But yeah, I guess that was worth mentioning too. And that is the version that comes with EA Play on PC as well, Dan. So
Okay.
one could argue it's just $10, not 20 for probably moving forward with the majority of users
Okay.
would be paying if they got Game Pass. Frame Time Chakra writes in and says, read your last loose ends. I feel like there's an incredibly missed opportunity on a very important point. It's actually impossible to get a new HDMI 2.0B certification at this time. HDMI 2.1 subsumes the previous standard. All devices that would receive 2.0B certification must now receive 2.1 instead. So you can get Vega, for example, certified as HDMI 2.1. Guys, actually, you have to in new products. As a result, there is now a USB 3.x style free-for-all for features going on. Yeah, I remember that. HDR support, 10-bit support, HDMI deep color support, VRR. He goes on and on about all these things. Like, basically, HDMI is actually pretty bad and anti-consumer, in my opinion. You literally have to make a list of feature points you care about, compare a short list, and then read very carefully with what you're buying. Sorry for the novella, but there is no shortcut for any of this. You must understand what features you want and check that the product you're buying includes them. Sources, syncs, and intermediate devices. And I'm assuming he's responding, I actually don't remember exactly for sure, but the Switch 2, I think someone asked, it's going to have HDMI 2.1, right? He's saying, well, it has to with what they call 2.1. That doesn't mean it'll have all of the newest features. And to be clear, though, Frame Time, from what I've heard, they copied or really ported the Lovelace output IP block to the Switch 2. So that was a Lovelace enhancement they brought to it. It can use the newest HDMI, though, which you would expect from a console. It's not using some old HDMI because it uses Ampere or something. But yeah, so I think we've covered that, though, months ago when they did that. I think it was in a wrap-up. I mean, you said, what do you want us to say? That's stupid.
Yeah, I mean, all those standards. If you make a standard that's worse than a previous one, and now everyone has to use it, seems stupid and bad for the consumer to me. But
yeah, but alrighty, let us actually now move on to the first story. Story number one. CHIPS Act gives $6.6 billion to TSMC to make 2nm fab in Arizona, and $6.4 billion for Samsung to build 2 and 4nm fabs in Texas. Quoting from Anatech with a little bit of editorialization from another article, TSMC has entered into a preliminary agreement with the U.S. Department of Commerce, securing up to $6.6 billion in direct funding and access to up to $5 billion in loans under the CHIPS and Science Act. With this latest round of support from the United States government, TSMC in turn will be adding a third fab to their Arizona project, with its investment in the region soaring to more than $65 billion total. This move not only signifies the largest foreign direct investment in Arizona, but also marks one of the biggest support packages in the U.S. government plans to make under the CHIPS Act, second now only to Intel's $8.5 billion awarded last month. TSMC is currently equipping its Fab 21 Phase 1 and expects that we'll start making chips using N4 and N5 class technologies in the first half of next year. And Fab 21 Phase 2 will commence operations in 2028. Will make chips under N3 and N2 production nodes. The newly announced third fab is set to manufacture chips on 2nm class or beyond, too, with the start production anticipated at the end of the decade. Meanwhile, the Biden-Harris administration also announced that the U.S. Department of Commerce and Samsung Electronics have signed a non-binding preliminary memorandum of terms to provide up to $6.4 billion in direct funding under the CHIPS Act to build 2nm and 4nm fabs in Texas. With Samsung is expected to invest more than $40 billion in the region in the coming years, and the proposed investment would support the creation of over 20,000 jobs. The proposed investment would turn Samsung's existing presence in Texas into a comprehensive ecosystem for the development and production of leading-edge chips in the United States, including 2 new leading-edge logic fabs, an R&D fab, and an advanced packaging facility in Taylor, as well as an expansion to their Austin facility. So, yeah, don't get me wrong, by the way, this is me just adding on to it. I've heard these reports of like culture issues and like conflict between upper management at TSMC and really just American workers saying maybe we don't want to work 80 hours a week. And TSMC going, why? But I think they will work through that, because I'm getting ahead of a correction someone will issue where they're like, well, this still won't work. It will work. It's just not going to be. This is a big deal. But that is the point, too. Yeah, there's going to be culture issues. There's going to be growing pains. But it's because this is a big issue. This is a huge shift for TSMC to build their cutting-edge nodes in the United States at this scale. And in fact, similar funding is being sent to Samsung as well. And so I think that's just a big deal in general that we're seeing this shift by TSMC. You know, I talked with Asianometry, which is a pretty large YouTube channel based in Taiwan, about this. And it was interesting. He said it wasn't just about although this is probably a factor, geopolitical worries that TSMC would diversify to other regions from Taiwan with their leading nodes. We also said they're just running out of space and energy. Like, these require a lot of energy. They wanted to use solar for one of the fabs. They canceled it in Taiwan. And
I mean that might be big. We pretty much have endless space in the U.S. to expand with solar if we want to.
Especially in where?
TSMC is an island.
Arizona and Texas. So you can see why all of this is happening here. So that's one thing. This is just news because this is a shift in policy. This is a big deal. Another big deal. Guys, second only to Intel getting $8.5 billion for this. I mean, guys, they're now add up TSMC and Samsung. Like, they're funding them as well. And they will fund them more and more, I feel like, if Intel falls behind. I just think this also is an important story to illustrate that, like, when people talk about, well, the U.S. government will bail out Intel. Why? They will just pay TSMC or Samsung to come here. Both close Western allies, both within the United States, with us being able to use them if something happened to Taiwan's headquarters. Intel does not have a get-out-of-jail-free card with their fabs. They have to be better to win now. The U.S. government will fund other companies besides Intel.
Well, yeah, I mean, they've also funded Global Foundries, as we talked about a while.
Although they're not as leading. But
they're not leading edge, but I mean, given enough time, I don't know if that's true. I don't think they're even interested in it. Given enough time, maybe they could, but I don't think that's what their goal even is at this point. But yeah, I mean, the Intel is falling behind on leading nodes, and Samsung.
Technology.
Yeah, and Samsung is a bit sketchy in how they advertise their nodes, and TSMC is clearly in the lead right now. And there's a pretty fraught geopolitical situation going on right now, so it would make sense for both U.S. to want to bring TSMC and Samsung over, and it would make sense for them to want to diversify into the United States. I mean, it's a bit of a surprise that they're actually bringing their most advanced nodes over to the U.S., but I mean. I guess at some point it was bound to happen. And, maybe that earthquake is also, not saying it would have pushed this because this was probably in the works for a while, but that earthquake shows, like, how bad having all of your manufacturing in one place could potentially be. Luckily, it seems like Taiwan was able to bounce back pretty well from that earthquake, but a 7.2 magnitude earthquake isn't something to scoff at.
Yeah. And so, again, I don't want to get too repetitive. I think we basically covered what we wanted to say, but two things. A lot of people said TSMC will never divest or stray from their Silicon Shield plan. And they're not really, but they are doing it. They are building cutting-edge fabs in the United States. There will be issues doing it. They're going to do it. And the U.S. government is funding TSMC and Samsung, not as much as Intel overall, but it could get there. And Intel is not... I've just seen so many people talking about how, like, especially in some investing or consulting calls I'm on, like, yeah, but what about all the CHIPS money? Can't Intel never fail? And it's like, we saw the DoD pull funding. I was told directly it's because they didn't like what they saw at Intel. No, Intel does not have a blank check. They will just fund TSMC instead, and increasingly do so if they keep feeling like Intel is more of a charity to fund, not the best use of taxpayer dollars to get secure leading edge nodes in the United States.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and from what I've read, they still are, like you said, this isn't a complete change in strategy. I mean, it's not like they're building their new biggest fab. The fabs in Taiwan are still going to be bigger than the fabs here. So,
and that's why I think that's actually the bigger takeaway I have. Isn't TSMC's side of it? It is just that in the United States government will fund people besides Intel, clearly. Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of Intel, let us now move on to story number 2. Intel introduces Gaudi 3 AI Accelerator, going bigger and aiming higher in the AI market. Quoting from Anantech, during Intel's second day of their Vision 2024 conference, Gaudi 3 was announced, the next generation of Gaudi high-performance AI accelerators from Intel's Habana Labs subsidiary. The latest iteration will be launching in the third quarter of 2024. So now let's take a closer look at it. It is a direct evolution of the Gaudi 2 hardware. Habana Labs has settled on an architecture that they like and consider successful, so it isn't orchestrating a massive overhaul of the architecture that's going to allegedly come with Falcon Shores. The flip side to that, however, is that there's not a ton of talk here in terms of new features, or features that Intel wants to disclose, at least so far. So at a high level, Gaudi 3 is more of a good thing, or at least that's how Intel characterized it. The chip's BF16 performance is 18 1,835 teraflops, putting it at parity with FP8 performance. This is somewhat surprising to see since most architectures can execute FP8 at twice the FP16 rate. I think we saw something similar with that too. With what was the previous one? Ponte Vecchio. By the way, this puts Gaudi 3 in a better position than we first thought for a higher precision BF16 training. And feeding the beast is an oddly outdated HBM2E memory controller, the same memory type used by Gaudi 2. Well, Intel is probably a smidge too early for HBM3 when they tried to accelerate this. It's still surprising to not see them at least use HBM3, both for the greater memory bandwidth, but more importantly, the greater memory capacity HBM3 and E forwards. As a result of sticking with HBM2E, the highest capacity stacks available are 16 gigabyte, giving the accelerator a total of 128 gigabytes of memory. This is clocked at 3.7 gigabit per second per pin for a total bandwidth of 3.7 terabytes per second. Each Gaudi 3 die offers 4 HDMI 2, 3 PHYs, bringing the chip's total to 8 stacks of memory. The TDP for the basic air-cooled model is 900 watts, 50% higher than the 600 watt limit of its predecessor. I believe that's in line with Blackwell, isn't it? Intel is making use of the OAM 2.0 form factor here, which affords a higher power limit than OAM 1.x, which is 700 watts. However, Intel is also developing and qualifying liquid-cooled versions, which will offer higher performance in exchange for, I guess, above 1,000 watt TDPs. All forms of Gaudi 3 will use PCIe backhaul to connect to their host CPU. Gaudi 3 supported PCIe Gen 5 times 16 link. Meanwhile, Intel is projecting 1.3 to 1.5 the inference performance of H200 or 100, and perhaps most notably at up to 2.3 the power efficiency, they claim. As always, however, the devil's in the details. Intel still loses the H100 based on even their own numbers at times in these inference workloads, particularly those without 2K output. So the Gaudi 3 is far from a clean sweep. Of course, they're all the benchmarks results that Intel isn't promoting that I'm sure we will see soon enough. And yeah, so that last part is really what I'd latch onto from the people I talked with behind the scenes. Like, my gut reaction was what I was told, too, eventually, from industry veterans, which is like, it just kind of seems like MI300X. I remember MI300X, where it's like 20 to 60% faster. Sometimes H100 is just as fast. So I don't know. When I look at Gaudi 3, most people tell me that they think it costs more to produce than MI300X. And they also tell me that it's just MI300X tier performance, they claim, we'll see, coming out half a year late with less RAM, which was like the thing making MI300X actually remain competitive, or should I say, have a niche next to Blackwell. Is they have the same amount of RAM, maybe it's half the speed or something, but or 40, I don't know what it is. I don't even know if it's half. It's weaker though, but it has the same amount of RAM. So a lot of people are just going to choose that if it's less than half the price. Gaudi, I don't see the point. I don't see how this looks competitive at all.
Yeah, I mean, I never put too much stock in not Nvidia, Intel slides at this point. So waiting for benchmarks, I think, is essential here. I mean, what they're putting on paper to me looks like they're really trying to polish what they're selling you, though. So yeah, I mean, I'm not expecting that much.
Just HBM2E. When I saw that, I'm like, huh.
Well, that to me just seems like they couldn't update their controller at all, and they put all their work into just expanding the number of tensor cores. Yeah, that's the one thing I'll say is based on what they're advertising, it looks like it's at least a big step up in efficiency from the Gaudi 2, because I mean it uses 50% more energy, but it does have more than double the tensor cores at least.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't have much else to say about this except that they announced it. They have their competitor, but it's really an in-between MI300X and Hopper competitor, in my opinion, somewhere or comparable to that with less RAM. I don't see this moving the needle at all in terms of anyone mentioning that they're looking to Intel to build anything with AI.
Yeah.
All right. QH Freddy writes in, he says, I feel like AMD's fumbling with MI300X is not Yex, MI300X, is yet another symptom of the way they are still stuck in the mindset of being the underdog. AMD plays things too cautious in the wrong markets. I feel like they are being too frugal all around, are looking for explosive growth, and are putting the onus on their customer to polish the products and find reasons to buy them rather than their competitors. Despite almost 3 years of a commanding lead in laptop efficiency, they have yet to break into the thin and light laptop market in any substantial degree. They oversegment Threadripper to a degree that makes them look normal, that makes Intel's offerings look decent. And RDNA 3 fell flat in many ways and had to be salvaged by sacrificing margins, and even the stingy chipset setup for M5 just smacks of, I don't want to do it. AMD is almost half an Intel in terms of revenue, but they are not just aggressively taking and locking the markets. AMD has a war chest, Are they going to use it to win, or are they going to sit on it until they need to bail them out? Until they need to bail them out again. I don't know what that they is, but I get the question. I mean, look, one thing that's been updated to me in the past week, in some calls with people, is that MI300X does exist. Most of the complaints, actually, I'm starting to be told, are the fact that it doesn't have, they haven't launched the PCIe version yet. And a lot of the people that would want to save money and buy an MI300X over NVIDIA are probably people that have a lot of A100s that were PCIe versions or something. Like a lot of the earliest people that would be upgrading now would be using PCIe, not some OAM socket thing. And in fact, someone else actually told me this too. It was interesting. The person said, also the resale value on OAM so far is garbage. But if you have a PCIe like MI250X, it will sell on eBay to some lab.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
OAM, not so much. The market's not as big. So that's most of the complaints right now. So I want to be clear. I may have said how slow the ramp of MI300X is on paper, although I still hear the complaints are just as big because they're not making the version they want. Now, for your actual question, I mean, I let's see what they do with Zen 5. It kind of seems like they are being aggressive. I mean, they're launching like 5 to 6 different Zen 5 products or something insane. Let's see what, I mean, like what? They got Fire Range, Strix, Halo, Point, Kraken, and I think there's even rumored maybe they'll do something with like Sonoma Valley replacing Mendocino, which I heard could have been canceled, but now it might not be. It might use Zen 5C. So if they do all of that, I don't know. They're launching a lot. Oh, and then of course Turin, maybe Turin AI, Turin Dense. Like there's a lot of stuff they're doing. Let's see how quickly it comes out and what volume. They canceled top RDNA 4, maybe to allow for more capacity for all these other things, especially when it comes to making their AI stuff that uses 3D packaging like RDNA 3 does. I think it's a little premature to say they're never going to go for a kill because it almost feels like they're going to this fall. What do you think, Dan?
I mean, I would say like with their GPUs, there's never really quite been a point where they could have gone for the kill because their software features still need to catch up with NVIDIA. So I still think that AMD's decently behind, and there's a risk that they're going to start being lapped by NVIDIA again if they don't catch up after RDNA 4. With their CPUs, I mean, I guess you could argue that maybe they should have started being aggressive a generation earlier than when they appear to be, but yeah, I think everything points to like with Halo, I mean Strix, and with Zen 5, they're going to be aggressive in those markets.
Yeah.
And then the MI300, I guess I really just don't know as much about that. I mean, I did read there while looking for stories for this episode that a new startup is buying a bunch of MI300Xs for their AI like cloud computing company because they can actually buy them. So, I mean, there is a market for them. And yeah, it would have probably been better if they had more of those out because some people just want to buy not CPU, just want to buy these GPUs right now and they can't get what NVIDIA is selling.
And not as easily or as cheaply as they want to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think I tend to agree with you with the graphics thing. A lot of people think that they missed it with RDNA 2, like that they could have made more. But
I agree.
But could they have?
I mean,
NVIDIA used 8 nanometer, and they had a ton of capacity, and they have way more experience with massive supply chains in graphics than AMD does. I think maybe they could have done more there. It's almost like they needed the equivalent of what the RX 7600 tried to do earlier. They needed like a 12 or 10 nanometer $200 card mass produced. That was the time to do it, and it was a gen late.
Yeah, I mean, I guess with the RDNA 2, they had a lot of RDNA 2 was a very well-received generation, I guess. So, hypothetically, I guess maybe it could have done better against Ampere than it did. But I really don't know. I mean, stock for RDNA 2 is still drying up years later. And so I think maybe they did make the right bet, or maybe they couldn't even have made a bigger bet.
Right.
But if they couldn't have, they lucked out because I think they would be on the same place that NVIDIA is with Ampere, where they're still selling through
3060s.
Tons of 3060s, whereas at least with AMD, it seems like the prices of those cards are starting to go up. So meaning the stock is starting to go away.
Which means it's happening also right before RDNA 4 comes out. nothing's stopping them then for going for it with RDNA 4. So,
yeah,
which comes back to the same thing I said. Let's see how things go this fall, QH Freddy. But here's what I'll say. If they launch just a 16-core Zen 5 with no V-cache announced at the beginning, no Zen 5 C cores, and it's $1,000, and then they announce RDNA 4 and it's $600, and it's just a better 7900 GRE. Yeah, all right. They're being stupid. They need to start going for kills here. But let's see if that's what they do, because I suspect they're going to be more aggressive than we expect. And hey, you can see it in the background there. There's a Hawkpoint product that is actually out, in around when they said it would be out, whereas Phoenix wasn't. And there's a lot of OEMs saying that they are going and getting AMD stuff easily, and it's selling. So maybe this is the gen they fix their supply stuff in laptop, and all evidence is this is the year they want to go for laptop anyway. So let's wait and see, because I suspect they might actually be finally doing all the things we've been hoping they would do. But all right, let us now move on then to story number 3. All Jesse wants is for Maurice to play with her more often, but unfortunately he just does not give out playtime or kisses for as low of a rate as she does. And I think she's just going to have to deal with that. But do you know what you don't have to deal with? Paying too much for Microsoft software if you go to cdkeyoffer.com. This piece of content is sponsored by cdkeyoffer.com. Whether it's Microsoft operating systems, Office products, or even many of the latest games, cdkeyoffer.com provides PC gamers with a product this community deserves. Amongst endlessly elevating component costs, fair pricing on Microsoft keys is one thing that we at least should get, I think. And the Moore's Law is Dead team has been working with cdkeyoffer.com for a very long time. And that's because they're good to me, good to Dan, good to about a dozen family members of friends of mine that have used their services. And they've been really, really good, most importantly, to the Moore's Law is Dead community. So support this channel by using offer code BrokenSilicon to save 25% off Microsoft software, or you can also use Die Shrink to save 3% off everything else on the website like games. Using either of those codes really helps the channel a ton, and it helps save you money. So use those codes BrokenSilicon and Die Shrink at cdkeyoffer.com today. Intel reliability called into question is what I titled it. I have a bunch of links here. I've one to Tech Yes City video. I've one to The Register, The Verge, Tom's Hardware. There's just been tons of reports really over the past few months, but it's starting to crescendo, I think, a bit, of a lot of RMAs, a lot of returns, a lot of stability issues with Intel. And I know you looked into this one more than I did today. So what's going on, Dan?
Yeah, so it really does seem like there have been issues for the past couple months. Like a couple of the linked stories are from February and March of this year. But things came to a head for starting to come to a head for a couple reasons. One, I believe it was a patch released on April 12th by Nvidia. Nvidia basically directly called out Intel in their patch notes by telling users who are having stability issues to go to an Intel community page to report their issues, as well as potential fix for Intel stability issues with their cards from a Epic developer, an Epic affiliate. And on top of that, a PC World put out a video recently on one of their contributors, a different Will Smith, who is big into Fortnite having stability issues. And they eventually concluded, when we swapped out the CPU, it started working again. Mm-hmm.
Just to another version of the same model, suggesting it was burning out.
Yeah, so those two stories, I think, forced Intel's hand into publicly stating, there's an issue, we're investigating, but we're not sure what it is. In the show notes, there's a story that we have linked from February by the Unreal affiliate that put out BIOS settings that they recommend using to get rid of the stability issues. And it's basically you just have to underclock it, especially if you're using Unreal Engine 5, because the issue seems to be specifically related to the compression algorithm and decompression algorithm that the Unreal 5 engine uses.
I've also heard that Unreal Engine 5 is really, really taxing on CPUs in general. So yeah, I don't know. This was something that I saw. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do a video on it. Instead, the next story is what I decided to talk about this week, which was Zen 7, which I think was probably a better choice. But, that's why I want to take some time this episode to get into it, because I did reach out to some sources, and I want to put one on screen here. So I'm just quoting from someone who works at a major retailer, decently high up at it, who tells me, this is one of those people that I talk to in a lot of my leaks about supply and volume and what's going on with like people at Micro Center and Amazon and Newegg. He goes, frankly, since 10th gen Intel has had increasingly bad reliability for us, although I think Alder Lake was okay. However, 13th gen had far more returns and burnt out chips than 11th gen, and 14th gen is a disaster. Even worse, RMAs keep taking longer and longer to fill at Intel, suggesting they have a lot of them to address, and also that they have a limited number of the yields they need to certify as the top SKU. So this person wanted to emphasize this, because I asked, hey, I'm seeing all these reports of reliability issues. Have you seen this? And this person goes, yeah. Actually, though, it's been getting worse since 10th gen, except Alder Lake didn't get worse. But 13 was bad. 14th gen is very bad. We are constantly having returns to our website all the time, more so than ever before. And we're not always getting them back from Intel quickly. Meaning they don't have a lot that can hit the top bins, and or they're sending a lot of chips back right now. And in fact, while we were talking, Dan, another source at a major retailer responded to me and says, yes, as a matter of fact, over half the customer setups of anything Alder Lake or later has been trouble, bad drivers, recovery issues, tons of RMAs. So there is something going on with Intel reliability. It's been getting worse, but it got exponentially worse with 14th gen. You're not just hearing about it as a rumor. It is getting to the point where this could be a tiebreaker where I go, it's starting to become a Haswell versus pile driver. Why would I recommend anything Intel anymore?
Yeah, it's weird because everything I read said that it's a small percentage that are affected, but I don't know how small of a percentage that is. And if you have retailers saying, well, people are returning or RMAing these things constantly, I mean, it can't be too small of a percentage, can it? Maybe it's not 50, but I don't know, maybe 5 or 10, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I didn't ask, nor was I told a percentage, what percentage are returned. I would assume it's not something like half of them, but it is more, and it is getting to the point where, at least, so 2 people got back to me, one while I was recording with you just now, but no one's responded there's some more. Yeah, it's up a little. They're all all caps. Yes, it's a constant thing we're dealing with every week now.
Yeah, so I mean, that points to it. Why maybe it took a while for more people to start talking about this is, and maybe it does just bubble for under the surface for a little bit until a couple people just directly call it out.
And if it's a degradation issue, this is something we should expect to see increasingly over time.
Yeah, and I mean, if it's a degradation issue, maybe Intel constantly pushing higher clocks that are incredibly inefficient. Oh, maybe that's the cause. It's probably not a coincidence that it seems to specifically affect the i9s and not the i5s. Although there's a little bit of discussion that it might also affect some of the i7s, but it seems to primarily be i9s.
It seems the more power being pumped through this thing, the more likely it is. And again, I want to be clear, there's a difference between that and heat. Chips can be built to run at higher temperatures. Basically, now both AMD and Intel run their chips around 90C to 100C. Mm-hmm. I think it's more of, okay, but what voltage is it at and how much energy is flowing through this tiny little square? Yeah. 400 watts might just be degrading it, whereas before, temperature, as long as it's not close to 110, 120, it's not an issue.
I mean, yeah, there's... I mean, I think there's a reason that most CPUs didn't use 400 watts in the past, and now we're seeing potentially seeing the bad downsides of doing that, other than just having something that's impossible to cool.
Yeah, so I don't know that I have much more to say about this. I think it's a developing story. I wanted to leak the input I was given from a couple people, but. Do you have anything else to say about it? And is this getting to the tipping point where if it's the same performance, same price, it's not just about the platform AM5 anymore? It's like, guys, they seem to not even work. We can't recommend them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Even before,
at least at the top end, maybe I could recommend budget deals for i5s.
Yeah, even before this, I don't know what case I would have recommended the 14900K in. So yeah, I guess that's just a blanket. Never buy the 14900K.
I already basically have that blanket opinion.
there's the, I don't know if you want to call this the final nail in the coffin. It's an extra nail after the final nail. We didn't need it, but it's an extra one. And I would say I'm cautious now about even something like a 14700K, but I think you need to wait more to see how it develops. If this is going to be a really big pervasive issue, or if it's a relatively minor one that broke out into public discussion, like, you know, how there was a lot of 7900 XT or XTXs that had the bad hotspot temperatures.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we'll see soon enough. But this is the only final thing I could think of to say is more evidence of Intel. Arrow Lake needs to win, be competitively priced, have good volume, and it needs to use a reasonable amount of energy. Alder Lake energy levels at most. This got to stop. It's just got to stop, people. All right. Now, let us switch gears here with story number 4. Early AMD Zen 7 details leaked by Moore's Law is dead. Last week, yours truly leaked new Zen 6 and Zen 7 details. In summary, Zen 6's design should be locked in Q3 of this year. So yes, by the end of the year, expect some big, pretty firm Zen 6 leaks. And while I know 2nm and 3nm were planned, it still doesn't sound entirely decided how much of the lineup will be either. I expect both to be used, but I've heard some people suggest to me that they may go all 2nm or mostly 2nm. They may use more of another. So that still isn't entirely decided, even though we literally have roadmaps, of course, from previously saying that they're looking at both. And here's an interesting thing that I think I've talked to you about many times offline, Dan. I don't believe I confirmed publicly, though, until this video, which is probably overdue that I did. There's going to be standard, dense classic, and client dense core variants, meaning that standard, it's what you expect, you know, the standard core count, clocks high, a lot of cache, you know, blah, blah, blah. Then there's dense classic. That's what we think of as C cores right now, trying to fit double the cores in something that's only like 30, 50% bigger for the chiplet. But then there's also client dense, which says, what if we don't care about efficiency and really do just want double the cores in the same space? That's the idea there. And then blah, blah, blah. It is now basically, and also Zen 6 is basically a new architecture over Zen 5 at this point. They had to do a new execution scheduler and a new memory controller due to the issues that they had. And so I think Zen 6 could be as big of a overhaul as Zen 2 was, if not maybe bigger than Zen 2 was. And meanwhile, Prometheus is the codename for Zen 7 cores. And Zen 7 is almost a brand new architecture, just like Zen 5 was, although some aspects have been reduced in scope due to the issues they had with both Zen 4 and Zen 5. Zen 4, of course, everybody was supposed to come out half a year, or I believe half a year to a year sooner than it did. Zen 5 was, of course, supposed to come out half a year before it will. So I think AMD is realizing maybe we don't entirely do a new architecture every 2 gens because it seems to be needless at a certain point. Having said that, though, I do want to point something out here. I've seen some people in the comments of this video say, I'm disappointed Zen 7 isn't a completely grounds up redesign like Zen 5 is. Right, but also Zen 6 wasn't going to get a new memory controller, and the execution scheduler wasn't going to be entirely new. So if both of those are being overhauled in Zen 6, one could argue they pulled up that work that was going to be in Zen 7 to Zen 6 because it needed it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. To me, that sounds like Zen 7 will be should be more iterative if they're completely overhauling that.
More iterative, I think, than Zen 5 will be, but still much more than still more than Zen 4 was. And also Zen 7 will have at least 3 variants again, from what I'm hearing. You know, they're still planning standard, classic, dense client. I'm sorry to say standard, dense, classic, dense client. But I even heard there could be 4 or 5 variants. And this has caused a lot of consternation at AMD with engineers saying, well, are you going to double my headcounts for our team if we're going to make triple the Zen Arc 5 times? I mean, we can't afford to do this unless we're as big as Intel. So there's been some pushback. And when I say, and that some of these architectures would be entirely different, like they would strip out some instruction sets and features to make it more or less dense or get higher clocks, to the point that it'd be hard to argue the most different examples of Zen 7 are even the same architecture. And there's been a lot of pushback on that. So that could happen where they basically say, this is Zen and now this is a new thing coming out every year. But I don't know that I double down that's going to happen yet, nor am I ready to double down on what version Zen 7 will happen. Just that it sounds like it will have at least 3 and they'll be even more different than before. All right, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the 3 that you laid out that will be with Zen 6 sounds like enough. It sounds good enough for the current space, with standard just being, what consumers get. Well, consumers getting standard and dense classic CPUs, or heterogeneous standard and dense classic, like we were seeing with, oh, come on. What's the Little Phoenix, right?
Yeah.
And then client dense, getting it even more dense and having more cores sounds good for like exascaling or whatever. So, I mean, those three sound like enough to break into, not break into, to supply every space they want to, versus what Intel has right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know what the other two would be if they want to make 5 different variants, but
well, again, and please no one read into this as being 100% this will happen, but I heard stuff like, oh, now they remove AVX 512 with 1 and a couple other instruction sets, and then they use it in products where they know it's unlikely to be used, and then maybe 1 is built to clock really, really fast with even less density. Those are the sort of things you could see them playing around with. Although I would almost argue just make standard the fast clocking one. I mean, otherwise I don't see the point. And then make client the one that's in the middle with more cores.
Yeah, and at a certain point, you just have to say, well, when are we almost just getting into making semi-custom variants for, where maybe like if a company needs that, they co-develop that with them or something.
Like Sony did with their version of Zen 2. Yeah, I mean, let me see here. I don't know that I have much else to say about this. This was more about the general sentiment, timing. I guess I didn't put this in the write-up too. It sounds like Zen 6 is probably, my opinion is it's probably slipping to 2026, which would be the least surprising thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, I mean, 2024? I mean, that this year we'll get Zen 5, right?
And probably in like 3 to 5 months, yes.
Yeah. So I don't know. If it's late 2026, that's clearly points to a big slowdown, but if it's like mid 2026, that's not that bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there is some of this where they're like, but we keep trying to do everything in a year and a half. In the past 2 gens have fallen to 2 years.
Yeah,
maybe we just say 20 months and keep it at that moving forward. Like we skip up a quarter every now and then when we can, if it makes sense to. I think that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I guess the only other thing I can really say is I think Zen 6 sounds like a pretty huge deal then. Like my understanding is they're 3D stacking them. They want there to be they want there to be monolithic levels of latency. And it sounds like, I mean, I have verified now actually from 2 different things, a roadmap and that diagram of Venice that I think went under the radar with some people. Remember where it literally shows 32 core CCXs put together in chiplet form. Like, so we know they're planning 32 core chiplets and 16 core chiplets. That would suggest, unless these standard ones are just one giant 16 core chiplet, which I think is plausible. It to me kind of sounds like they're going to get a lot of core count increases as well. So if we get core count increases, new memory controller, new scheduler, I think we might just get like another above 10% IPC increase, core counts increases, and a crazy good gaming performance. I think Zen 6 is sounding really exciting.
Zen 6 sounds like my next upgrade then, probably.
It's kind of what I'm feeling as well.
Because I don't think I'll want to get Zen 5, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah. Well, on these notes, QH Freddy writes in, would you bet a 16-core Zen 6 CPU that the Zen 6 high-end parts, so the equivalents to the like of the 7950X, have more than 16 big cores and are still supported on AM5? I'm close to being ready to bet that it would be on AM5, actually. I mean, I've heard it from basically everybody. So, yeah, I'd probably bet that. Am I willing to bet for sure that they'll launch with more than 16 big cores? With the caveat that I consider C cores big cores, by the way. So I would lose the bet if they invented extra dense and it really just is weaker, Almost, but I can't say I'm 100% sure yet because I still don't know if, like, what if they look at it and they go, we want to put an AI accelerator chiplet instead of another core chiplet, or they go, we just think it's worthless or something. I'm still not 100% on do-it-yourself desktop core count increases with Zen 6, but I think it is highly likely when I see 16 and 32 core chiplets.
Yeah, I mean, I would be pretty certain by Zen 7 that they'll do a core increase, but I could see another 2 gens of just 16 core on desktop.
And again, we beg the question, who needs this, really? Though, I mean, 16 cores is still such overkill for me. QH Freddy writes in again. He says, if hypothetically Zen 6 was on a new platform and AM5 ended with Zen 5, what do you think Zen 6 would have to bring to justify that earlier change in the platform? Also, if the above happened, how likely do you think it would be that AM5 coexisted with the new platform and had lower end Zen 6 parts? Well, the new platform took an HEDT role. That's interesting. Supporting the top end parts, maybe also the largest V cache sizes. I could see that maybe being something that they'd argue is like, hey, we're launching AM6 early because it supports higher core counts and we want, something better than Threadripper that's cheaper to make. Or something like Threadripper that's cheaper to make and doesn't go up to like 128 cores. We don't think gamers or even a lot of workstation people at this point need that. But frankly, if they did that, it would just have to be like a bigger uplift than Zen 2, something like what we saw with almost Zen 1, in my opinion, because they said they were going to support this for a long time. They would have had 4, then 5. Who knows? Maybe there'd be like a 5 refresh generation. But for me, it would have to be such an uplift that they're like, guys, we couldn't do it. And then they'd be given some benefit of the doubt. But there's no way around it. I don't know if it'd be fully... that's what would justify it. You can only justify it if you're like, we can't make this work on AM5, guys. But and the opposite of Intel, like Kaby Lake and Skylake are on, but then Coffee and Comet Lake could get new platforms, which was completely unnecessary. That's why. To me, but it'd still make people mad, I think.
Yeah, to me that almost just sounds like they would be creating a new socket in between Threadripper and desktop. And I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know. I mean, if they released AM6 early, it would just have to be increased core counts, massive increased I/O, DDR6, something like that.
Yeah, I mean,
to justify a new platform.
I would also just, say, just for the record here, from what I've heard, Zen 6 is on AM5. From what I've heard, they have both DDR5 and DDR6 versions of Zen 6, with there being a new socket for Zen 6, but also they might have a cheaper Zen 6 variant with DDR5 on the existing EPYC socket. And I've continued to hear that client Zen 6 plans to use DDR5, which by then, won't we have like DDR5 10,000? I think that'll be enough.
Yeah, that's probably true.
I mean, especially with latency reductions. But Bfish36 writes and he says, hi, Tom and Dan. I get the feeling that those who follow AMD want them to be more aggressive. In your opinion, which would benefit them more? Aggressively increasing volume, driving up supply in the market, or being more aggressive with their product stack, more SKU variations with potentially more aggressive pricing? My answer is it depends on the segment. In laptop, AI, and server, I just think they need more volume. Like, I think they're already winning in performance. It's can you buy it? And with AI, people want as much as they can get, so just make more. For Radeon, I think it's a bit of both. I think they need a bit more supply and a bit more aggressiveness, but you don't want to get into a mining bust situation. And in CPU, I think they do need to be more aggressive if they want to crush it, because they have an opportunity, I think, late this summer to close the door and do it yourself to Intel for the next 5 years.
Yeah, but I think for DIY, that's more just pricing than anything, because the DIY market is... I mean, you can expand the DIY market, but I think it's slower to expand. Well, I think there's less room for expansion than what they have in laptop, because laptop, they just need to take over what Intel has, where the DIY market is the size it is right now.
Yeah. If anything, in do-it-yourself, they just need to get in inroads with pre-builts. It's really a big issue.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
So I think generally speaking, it's supply. I think they have the performance and the efficiency wins. The only exception I have is you have to be careful with that in graphics. And in, it seems like it's easy to buy Zen 4. So I think in do-it-yourself, a little more aggressiveness would shut the door. Mm-hmm. All right. Let us now then move on to story number 5. Tessie is ready for spring. She's excited to get outside and start carrying around entire tree branches that she just thinks are S-tier sticks, which really, they can't be that healthy for her, although I can't imagine they're really any more unhealthy than the typical ramen people are eating on a busy workday. Well, of course that is, unless they eat Vite Ramen. This piece of content is brought to you by Vite Ramen. Vite Ramen is a healthy, tasty, and shelf-stable food crafted by an American startup that offers tons of options for eating healthy, like their classic packages that make it easy to add protein and other ingredients of your choice, or also their Ramen Go packages that offer a healthy, microwavable option for those who truly only have a 15-minute lunch break when they are away from home. And I also need to take a second to promote their Nano Boost Vitality Powder as well. Seriously, this is a fantastic alternative to coffee that you'll find me drinking in many Broken Silicon episodes when I'm forced to record late at night, and I truly do believe it blows away their competition. You have to understand, I've been working with the people at Vite for years now, and I have a lot of freedom in what I can promote from their website. And out of the things they make, I have to say, it blows away the competition. This thing tastes great. It's easy to mix into water. You never has that sand-like texture their competitors often have. And so I really cannot recommend that enough, in addition to just basically everything on their website. Going to their website and buying something from Vite Ramen, that directly supports this channel, and it supports a sponsor that's been good to the Moore's Law's Dead team for many years. So I really do like their products, all of them, especially their ramen and Nano Boost Vitality Powder, and I can't recommend them enough. So support Moore's Law's Dead by supporting Vite today. Nvidia RTX 5090 and 5080 poised for launch in the second half of this year. Hot on the heels of other outlets suggesting more than just the 5090 may launch this year, and indeed, the 5090 let me see. MLID got input from multiple sources that indeed the 5090 and 5080 may be announced very soon. I don't know what my brain was doing when I just put a sentence in front of the other. Anyways, summarizing what I leaked a couple weeks ago, one source at an AIB confirmed that both the 5090 and 5080 will launch by Q4 of this year, and they also may even launch by late Q3. Although I am told very specifically it is unlikely, but the fact that that sounds plausible tells you they're very serious about launching, not in December or something. Another source, a distributor, backed this up and then suggested that the main reason for this would likely actually not have anything to do with RDNA 4. And then a third source at an OEM said that despite the rumors, they don't think Blackwell laptops will actually be ready until late Q1 or Q2 next year, which is a little later than I was told by this person months ago, suggesting that volume is not seemingly going to be any better any earlier than expected from their part. And so a fourth source at Nvidia then confirmed what is basically happening. It is happening. They're going to launch the 5090 and at least the 5080 this year, and they may even announce it at Computex, I'm told. But it is unlikely that Gaming Blackwell will have good volume until next year, and that the earlier than expected launch date is really more due to the fact that they're going to be announcing the AI versions of GB 202 and 203 anyways soon. So, then everyone will know the specs. Mm-hmm. They might as well announce gaming. They might as well get this huge mindshare win by having a chart that goes across the sky above RDNA 4 as soon as possible.
Yeah.
But until the AI boom busts, do not expect it to be easy to buy the stuff. But it is exciting to see that we might actually have a lot to talk about after Computex this year.
Wait, when is Computex?
June.
Oh, yeah. Well, I am genuinely excited to see what the 5090 and 5080 ultimately look like. Both for because I'm anxious that they're gonna really go for insane pricing, and also just because it sounds like it's another big leap forward from Nvidia, a company that can't stop having big leaps forward, I guess.
Yeah. But go on, sorry.
But yeah, the gaming for Nvidia is always going to take the back burner to AI. So.
For the time being.
Well, yeah, until there's a bust, they're going to be the back burner.
So, I don't know that I have much else to say about this, except that this was really important because I had some of my best sources come to me and go, hey, I'm being told this might be announced in a couple months, and I'm being told it might even launch end of Q3, and it is more than the 5090. Some of them were confused why they would do this. Further talks, it was because why not if they're going to launch the chips anyways? And that does not mean it will be easy to get, but that does mean it's coming sooner than I think we have been expecting for a while here.
Yeah.
Although we've always said it's coming out this year, where a lot of channels said it wasn't for some reason.
Yeah, I suppose if they announce the specs, give a positive press cycle to yourselves early. release a small number of 5090s early too.
So that
Why
if
not?
RDNA 4 is really good, you still have all these reviews of like 5090 double the performance of the RDNA 4 or something, you know?
Yeah, because this generation AMD and Nvidia are going to have vastly different marketing strategies, as AMD isn't even trying to touch the 5090 this time.
Let me see here. Bfish writes in, and he says, "Hi, Tom and Dan. Usually AMD chips get paired with NVIDIA GPUs in gaming laptops. One of the major advantages of Strix is that it can drop into the same FP8 socket as Phoenix and Hotpoint. Does a potential motherboard redesign for Blackwell negate this advantage? I haven't heard there will be, and I do expect to hear more very soon, by the way, about mobile Blackwell, but I don't see why it would require anything new. It's just probably going to slot in the same way, 5060 to 4060 and so on and so forth up and down the stack. So I don't think there's any issue. And I think NVIDIA's ready and very excited to be paired with Strix."
Yeah.
Vise writes in and he says, "Howdy, Tom. With the surge in AI, do you think NVIDIA will pull out of the gaming space? If so, after what GPU generation?" No. I think GeForce will never die for pride reasons, at least as long as Jensen is alive and running NVIDIA at a minimum. I do think it is a point of pride for Jensen that they claim or can say they have the best gaming hardware on the planet. And I don't see that ever going away. Furthermore, I think sometimes people misunderstand like what I've leaked and what's being said about NVIDIA and AI priority in general. I think I said this, a half year, maybe a year ago at this point, but I said that some of the issues, I forgot what it was with Lovelace, but some of the issues with Lovelace, it was Starfield. It was like,
oh yeah,
and a couple other games had bad driver support at launch, and I was directly told by multiple people actually on that one at NVIDIA that, yeah, look, the ball was kind of dropped with increasing funding. But notice I said increasing. I didn't say they like fired half of the staff at NVIDIA. You know, I think from that perspective, then you go, well, NVIDIA still has massively more funding than Radeon, and they still make a lot of money. So I don't think if they need to work on AI more, yeah, they'll fund AI more. Gaming may get less of the budget increases, but why shrink the size of a team that's already bigger than Radeon? That's the way I think about it. It's doing fine against Radeon, so they're going to keep funding it at least at the level it is, and there's no reason to kill it. It's just such a marketing win to have that out there too. I don't ever think that's going to happen.
Jesus,
importance doesn't mean deletion.
And I'm just looking at their revenue right now. I mean, they are still making a substantial amount of their revenue through gaming, so I don't know why they would axe it unless it was a massive, massive drag on profits, despite having decent revenue.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I my eyes bulged a little bit there because I was looking at it there. This is from, I believe, Q4 last year, so it's a little out of date, but their data center is up 409% from the previous year, but they're still making a ton of money with gaming, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I don't have it pulled up here, but I remember we covered this on a Broken Silicon at some point within the last year, where it made headlines that AMD's gaming division is now like 2/3 or starting to catch up with NVIDIA. Well, sure, but NVIDIA still is getting more funding and bigger. So again, maybe they'll just let AMD get to 30, 40%, 50% market share in gaming. I'm not saying that's going to happen anytime soon, in my opinion, but maybe they'll let that happen. But they're letting that happen. They're not killing their gaming division. They're prioritizing budget increases for AI. That doesn't mean they need to do budget cuts for gaming. They have all this money. All right, let us then move on here to story number 6. All right, Sony brings trophies to PC. Was anyone expecting this? Quoting from the PlayStation blog, Ghost of Tsushima's Director's Cut is the first PlayStation title on PC that uses a new PlayStation overlay, which includes your friends list, trophies, settings, and your profile. This feature is available on Windows PCs and will be accessible from the in-game menu or for keyboard players by pressing the Shift F1 shortcut on your keyboard. While playing the game, you can earn PlayStation trophies just like on PlayStation consoles. To make use of features like trophies, friends list, and crossplay, you can sign in with your existing account for PlayStation Network or create a new account. The use of PlayStation Overlay is optional for both the single-player experience and Legends mode. When bringing a game over from PlayStation consoles to PC, the team at Nixxes always strives to give a great experience to as many players as possible. So I thought this, I don't know how much we have to say about this, but I just remember so much talk, especially when I listen to Sacred Symbols, which I know Colin Moriarty has a lot of fantastic sources at PlayStation. I mean, one of his best friends is Neil Druckmann. Like they go to lunch. That Sony's been scared to put trophies on really anything but PlayStation home consoles. They never put it on the PSP either, for security reasons. Because of that, security reasons. And so I actually think this is an interesting thing to note here. Don't you? Like, what's next? Bring the Xbox? I mean, they have MLB The Show on Xbox. Why not put trophies there?
I mean, I think it's a good from a marketing perspective and just for people that already own a PlayStation, like, well, we're giving you the option to also buy our stuff on PC now, and it will be as if it's on your PlayStation profile if you want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think it just makes sense. And, having an actual team that's dedicated to doing PC ports maybe gives them the confidence to that they won't repeat their past mistakes with the PS Vita.
Yeah. So,
but yeah, that's a big deal.
It's just, I don't know. It sounds like whatever they were worried about with security, they're not that worried anymore. And I don't really think I have anything else to say about that except, let's do it, man. Every game, let's get achievements, trophies, Xbox, PlayStation, maybe even Nintendo controller support, and the ability to talk to everybody. I am loving that if you get a PlayStation game for PC, you can use haptics a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. If we get Helldivers 2 for PlayStation, we can play with people on PC. More the better, please.
Yeah.
All right. Let us now then get into the wrap up. Battlefield 2042 is winding down, with Season 7 being the last one. I think this is also notable because I believe there's rumors that they're going to announce a new Battlefield within the year. So,
okay. Yeah, I mean, I think the most notable thing about it is we still haven't heard any news of the new Battlefield yet. I'm sure there's going to be one, but Battlefield, I'm a little worried, is on its last legs.
Well, EA did hire all of these people, promote people who were in charge of previous successful Battlefields. And so there's a lot. This happens every 4 Battlefields. There's a lot riding on the next one. I agree. Yeah. And I guess we'll have to see what happens here. But I will say, if they still have a new season, I don't know why they would announce any new Battlefield until that season's over and then wait a couple months ago. Okay, we've sold all the content we're going to sell on it. It's been out for years. True. I mean, didn't it come out in 2021, 2020?
Yep, 2021.
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, there hasn't been any other one since then. Yeah, so it'll be 4 years or so. So we're due to see something about this, and my suggestion would just be, and I will say I did play it a bit on the Hawkpoint tablet that I have. Should it finally turn off? I just had it running Metro Exodus nonstop behind me for most of the time. I didn't notice when it turned off. So there you go. I guess on battery, you can see it works for hours, even in a game where I haven't limited anything and I have maximum brightness. But I guess not 2 hours. But yeah, I mean, I played it on there a little bit, and it works well. It still has issues recognizing controllers half the time, though, I will say, which is insane, and it's been a Battlefield problem for a long time now. Although I don't remember it being one of 5 as much, but
I'm trying to remember. The most annoying was
4.
4, yeah.
It was terrible with 4.
If your controller came unplugged, you had to restart the game, and that was compounded by the issue that when we were playing Battlefield 4 on PC, you would have to use a PS4 controller, and
because you use a PS4 controller, yeah.
Well, yeah, I used a PS4 controller, and which was charged with the micro USBs, which are the worst ports ever. Yeah, I don't know why we use them.
Yeah, and that are the easiest to unplug. Think how dumb, even if you have an Xbox controller at times, if you booted up the game without it being plugged in, it wouldn't work. It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It was so dumb. All right, so I didn't actually look into this one too much, but I did see Gamers Nexus reporting on EK. I think I've heard about this too, imploding, like not paying employees, partners complaining nothing's getting done.
Was that the one that had a bunch of quality control issues?
They did,
too,
yeah.
Okay.
And I'm just realizing this now. The only input I can give on this is I think a couple months ago. So when I'd have to go through my notes. This is one of those things that I was like, oh, that's whatever, because I don't usually report on EK. But I think someone told me, by the way, those people are done. from what I heard a friend through a friend through a friend. So yeah, I thought it was worth mentioning there. Yeah, and at this point, this is in the wrap up as well. There is zero doubt that Zen 5 is launching. I mean, you have motherboard manufacturers saying they're starting to patch the motherboards for a launch in the next half of a year. I mean, I think it's starting to look even likely that it's an early Q3 launch. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
And that's good news, because if it got pushed back to Q4, then I go, okay, so there was like a real problem here, guys. What's going on? But it seems like, no, there was a problem and it's been fixed, which is good. More Granite Rapids details have emerged. There's not that much new here. I mean, we've had leaks of pictures of Granite Rapids a while ago. We've had, I leaked the core count. Did I leak it like 2 years ago? I leaked what Granite Rapids was or something, like including the entire layout. And what we do have here, though, which is interesting, is even more pictures and exact code names. So I don't know.
Yeah, code. Yeah,
not code names, like SKU names.
Yeah, it looks like they leaked out all the SKU names, and I think saying that they're going to be on 2 different platforms, which I don't remember if that's new or not, but and the amount of power it's using.
I don't think that's new. I don't remember ever hearing Beach Nut City and Avenue City. Maybe I did. I don't know, but no, I think what they're talking about here. No, there was always going to be multiple platforms, ones for even bigger models. All right, and then Nvidia announces new small form factor enthusiast GeForce initiative with many more single slot and ITX shaped small form factor graphics cards coming out. So I don't know that I have much to say about this. But it is interesting to see Nvidia now pushing. Maybe they heard people and they're like, hey, not everything can be 10 slots.
I mean, yeah, I'm not mad about that. Like, I wish we had more small cards these days.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now let us then move on to the final reader mails. TMC Paint writes in and he says, howdy. Have you or anyone you personally know taken advantage of a sub 75 watt PCIe slot provided power graphics card? Now that the RTX 3050 6GB is launched, when is the next time you believe AMD or Nvidia will launch a new card in this segment? I don't know about that, but I mean, I tested that RX 6400. You have one. I gave it to you, Dan, so you could have a backup card. It works. It plays games, 1080p, 1600p 60. It is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what you're going to see. Every gen, one of those will come out, but it's never going to be to big fanfare like it used to be in the past. It will just be like at the tail end of a generation, they say, and here's the new cheap card.
Yeah. Now, there will, of course, still be, it seems like this is a big initiative, more of these like A4000 things where that NVIDIA launches, or RTX 4000, I guess. But they're like, hey, we actually put what's used in the 4070, or I forgot what it was. Yeah, I think it was in a 70 watt package, like, which is cool. But those are not going to be cheap. And it's just going to be opportunistic, I think. I don't know what the next one would be from AMD. I mean, who knows? Maybe they launch some 75 watt version of the RX 7600 and call it the 8500. And then they just spit that out for 150 or 200 with 8 gigabytes. I think that's what you'll see. Just every now and then you get one. But it's starting to feel like the $150 to $200 market to me is starting to feel like what the $30 to $60 market was 10 years ago, if you know what I mean. Like they had the HD 5 450, the HD 6 450, then they would skip a few. Oh, here's the 7, whatever. Like, now that's what they do with the $150 market. Like, they're kind of just throwing out the $30 one because there's APUs, and they're like, yep, every couple gens there's some, weak card, but now it's $150. But it's also better than the GT 710 was, to be fair. Okay. Roan again writes in and says, hey, Tom and Dan, I'm curious about your takes on the 60 class GPU market right now, particularly on the NVIDIA side. It seems like prices have been stuck in the same places for a while now. Even the 3060 12 gigabyte isn't budging from $289. Are budget gamers getting a break anytime soon, or has the market settled into a spot where NVIDIA is comfortable staying? I think prices are pretty much where they're going to be for a bit. I think you'll see some tiers drop in price 10% here and there. A couple things get a little more expensive. But what we're seeing now is pretty much what you're going to see, I think, moving forward. And don't forget that the 3060 was $500. It was never MSRP, and then $400, and now it's $290. I could see it slowly drifting towards $250, especially refurbished models. And I think you can find those right now on eBay. I don't really see it going lower than that. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I feel like a few big grenades were thrown into the pricing market a few months ago, and and there was a huge drop in price, which was great, but that's not going to go on forever. And you're just not going to see a big price drop unless AMD or Nvidia announces they're doing price drops, or if you see new graphics card releases, because I think we're not getting any new graphics cards released at this level of power for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done a volume or supply update for months now, but it's because I have nothing to report. I mean, again, this came up on a consulting call where there are a bunch of people there, and like some people were talking like, hey, basically things are going steady goes it, like easy goes it. It's pretty much what we've been talking about for 6 months. I reached out to some other people too. You know, some people like New England Micro Center, and they're like, things are selling, not fantastic, but we've recovered. Things are going well. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are buying the 7800 XT still. The 7700 and 7900 XT are doing pretty well when they're at lower prices. 4070 Super, when it's discounted, is doing okay. A lot of people buying 3060s. There's still endless 3060s, I'm told. But that's not really an interesting video. Like, yes, how things were 6 months ago. So I don't see prices collapsing. I think for a long time, we're going to see the 7600 move towards 250 to 200, the 3060s drift towards 250 because it's 12 gigabytes, and then the 7600 XT drift towards 300, and that call it a day. That's where it's going to be, at least until RDNA 4 launches, I think. And I don't see why it would change. Things actually have gone down quite a bit, people. QH Freddy writes in, have 4090 power connectors actually stopped melting, or are people now just treating it as par for the course with those cards? Not entirely, no. I saw some report on video cards recently, too, where someone says, hey, their shop still repairs dozens of 4090s a month with the melted cables. My understanding is it's not most of them. It's not half of them. It's not a quarter of them. It's a notable amount, and it has not stopped.
I mean, yeah. Like,
mine's fine, though.
If you want to, go on the NVIDIA subreddit sometime. Or if you browse it, like, yeah, there's usually one or two posted on there every 2 weeks or so. Like, so it's still happening at some rate. I will say, I think a lot of it is the power mod cable. A lot of it was, yeah. Adapter. I think the majority of the issue is that faulty cable design, but not cable, adapter design. But it's not all of it. So, yeah, that's just it's a major failure that doesn't affect a lot of people with the 4090.
Mm-hmm. And I continue to hear nothing really changing. Like, it's not more than ever, but it still happens here and there. It does. And we've just accepted that there's like a 1 in 100 or a little chance it could happen.
Probably worse than that.
Probably less. You mean
better than that? Yeah.
You know, so
bad phrasing.
But it is what it is. Frankfurt25 writes in and says, hello, my apologies if this has already been discussed elsewhere, but I've not seen mention of it. China recently banned the purchase of AMD and Intel products for use on government PCs. I was wondering if you had any insight on the situation all around, how it affects Intel, AMD, and your take on what it means for China being ready to go to alternatives. Nothing. In fact, to my memory, Russia announced this like 10 years ago. So they'll just run some version of Linux or something, and they'll use something that isn't AMD or Intel. Notice they didn't say Nvidia. Is funny. So no, I wouldn't read into it. You know, that's not if they need to use them, they will. This is like, yeah, we're not going to give you an AMD laptop because we're paranoid.
Well, yeah, and it's specifically government PC, so it's not like they're completely pushing Intel and AMD out of China.
No, so I wouldn't read into it too much. Stuff like this gets announced all the time, and it doesn't mean they're never going to use it again. I don't really have anything to say. All right, well, that's going to do it for this fairly brief compared to previous episodes, but in 30 minutes or within 30 minutes we need to leave for the airport. So Dan can fly back to Minnesota.
Yes, I have a pretty hard out today. So,
but I think we didn't rush it.
No.
or try to meander too long. So this happens. I feel like finally after the insanity of 2019, really like late 2020 through 2024, things are calming down a bit. We're starting to get back to that era where like, I should say 2022 and 2023 like was 2 crazy years. And we're starting to get back to an era where like, yeah, every now and then there's a 1.5 hour episode. It's fine. Still had 5090, TSMC 2nm, Zen 7 to talk about. But we don't need to talk about 10 different graphics cards coming out in a week and 3 new versions of Intel architectures anymore.
Yeah, and I don't know. I feel like news usually piles up in Q3, Q4.
If there was ever a week for it to be a shorter one, it would be this one too, because of how busy we've been. And I think end of this quarter through end of the year is going to be just like 2022 all over again. So couple month break, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I am too.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for watching and for listening. Remember to hit the like button, to comment below about what you think about what we were talking about. That helps with the algorithm a lot. And then also, of course, to subscribe to the Moore's Law is Dead YouTube channel and ring the bell button and share this content. Subscribing helps the channel a lot. I've seen people say it doesn't. It does. It does help us get recommended more. Please subscribe to the Moore's Law is Dead YouTube channel. And then, of course, please also subscribe to the Moore's Law is Dead Patreon. We and Dan have been talking about this offline. There seems to be a new adpocalypse going on with YouTube. And it's never a plurality or rarely ever even a plurality of the revenue of a month. But it's usually a notable amount of revenue. And it's just basically gone. So that's a significant portion of our funding that is gone. Please support us on Patreon at even the lowest tier if you enjoy this content, because we're just not getting revenue from that anymore. And, you'll get access to hundreds of die shrinks. One just came out looking at that minis forum that finally ran out of battery while I had it running a game in full ray tracing constantly behind me the entire time. And you can hear my early thoughts on it and thoughts about upcoming APUs and stuff. Again, bonus hour-long piece of content with 0 ads, hundreds of those out there for you. You get early access to Broken Silicon at the right tier. You get all tiers, get access to the Discord where we can talk about this as well with people who are far less often typing in all caps, like in the other comment sections online. So please, we really do need your support more than ever on Patreon this year. Consider it, especially if the last time you were a patron, by the way, was like 3 years ago. We have a lot more content and it's higher quality right now too there. But yeah. All right, enough groveling so that we can put food on the table to pay me, Gerard, John Philippe, Carbon Cry, and you, and have a good week, everybody. This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, it's not just me. Moore's Law is Dead is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, renders being done by the industrial designer Jean-Philippe Clermont, and special assistance is also provided by Carmen Cry and Carrie Nosugad as well. Find all of our information at www.mooreslawsdead.com on the about/support page in the event you do want to hire me for consulting work, hire Gerard for audio work, hire Jean-Philippe for industrial design work, or you're interested in working with Carbon Cry or Carrie Nosugada as well. You can also find our long-term sponsors on that page if you want to show them some love for putting food on our tables. Or you can also mail us some love. You can send letters or hardware donations to the following address: Moore's Law is Dead, P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. Although, to be honest, the best way to show Moore's Law is Dead some love is to support us on Patreon. Patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content truly possible. Every month, and really every day, depending on who you're talking about, me, Gerard, Dan, and Jean-Philippe are working tirelessly to provide a steady stream of content that we could not keep doing unless we knew the work was possible without being reliant on sponsors dictating every little thing we put out. Don't get us wrong. We love our sponsors, but we love directly working for you, our fans, much more. If you have any extra money, even a couple free dollars a month, consider supporting us directly on Patreon. Those couple of monthly dollars will get you access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to ask guest questions, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who I am sure would love to meet you. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to early, ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the ability to ask questions in all Broken Silicon episodes and Loose Ends live streams ahead of the recording, and the entire back catalog of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, in addition to having thanks in the credits of videos and podcasts depending on the tier, with other perks available as well. And hey, if you cannot afford to support us directly every month, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family, and on social media and websites like Reddit, and give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast app of choice. All of this does really help us so much. But like I said, this podcast would not be possible without the patrons directly providing predictable and reliable support every month. And so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher supported levels: Brad Medlin, Drita Full, Z-Jiz, Daniel D, Aaron Close, Jen Rano, Daniel Hyde, GZ Ziggy, Deke, Nicholas Buckner, MJB1, SES Chalmers, Jem Ferrier, HardForum.com, Valco Malev, Jensen Wang, Gigris Acker, Sarcastro, Evan Dingle, Andrew S, Chris Rich, Compressed Earthbox, Rias Boy 08, Hal Buma, Shredberg, Greg Wanchik, Holden Mobley, Benjamin Cannon, Jonathan, Sammy Malas, Blake, Franco Frederic, Jordan Simkovic, Toko, Julian Leak, Jake Dude 23, The Boss Haas, Jake Martin, Zlicky, Stefan Hart, Meat and Pork, Tim Robb, Ian Clifford, Travis Gooding, Stefan Chrysanthine, Mad, Zutsu Taylor, Stephen Coates, Michael McGee, Greg, Patty Cake, Samuel Chief, Tommy, Mark Mitchell, Manay through Zinc, I Should, Mark Raidmaker, James Anderson, Cole Addict, Judson N, Cameron, Wesley Sager, Henry Zhang, Michelle Pell, D31337, Antics, Hexa Puma, Reginald Ari, Tik Autumn, Gaiman, Since Reagan, Jeff Sedler, Loophole 35, Jamie Witters, JSMH, Windstar, James I, Raider, Coy Leonard, Little Germany, Shay, Milton, Pulse Media, Melodic Warrior, Dave Schultz, Mac Daffy, Stephen Dick, Chuck Glidden, Brett Jones, Austin Haggerty, Justin Bustle, I-711-700K, Joe Foot, My Sharona, Earth Tours, Hardland, Slushbod, Jensen Angima, Joseph Kelly, Samuel Park, Win Wangham, Sagung, Tails 2299, Mio, Val Verga, John, Sisyphos 7771, Charles Russell, The Forbidden Juice, RB Racer, AC, Brian Wright, Michael Cozy, Dr. J. Matt, Alex Vega, Freedy, John Swim, Jola Martina, Keekum, Albergun, Solarized Deity, Matthew Marlowe, Whodat42, Penta Winter, Rowan McKickey, Cornster 671, Sprutnik, Jeffrey, Gentleman, Angel of Cake, Omega Doge, Roger Webster, Ian Paul Castro, and of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.